And on the last episode, we talked about the new passenger weights, how they're higher now at Legacy Airlines because of the mandatory periodic evaluation that the FAA has the airlines do. We discovered that the Airbus has a limitation that could be exceeded with the new passenger weights, and it must be coordinated with the below-wing services or the ground personnel. So we loaded up in Tucson the other morning, actually yesterday morning, and as our normal procedures dictate, when it was time to go, we shut the door, ran our checklist, we pushed off the gate. Usually on the taxi out, somewhere between the gate and the runway, the airplane will receive a printed out electronic weight and balance. And once that happens, the first officer's job is to verify winds, weights, and temperatures, make sure that the aircraft has the performance to take off in the current configuration that was planned or anticipated, and verify, put all the numbers in the flight management system, verify that with the captain, and take off. Well, we pushed off the gate, and as a habit, I usually have operations to whatever station we're in on comm number 2. If I'm not listening to a ramp control, somehow I'm listening to operations until we're number 1 for departure. So that's what I did. There was no ramp control in Tucson, so I had ground frequency in the first radio, and I had our Legacy Airlines operations frequency in the second radio. As we pushed off the gate, we started both engines. We were running a checklist. We were in the middle of doing a flight control check, and I heard operations call our flight number and say, "We need you to come back to the gate." And I'm like, "Okay, why?" We have a aft CG limit. We need to remove 4 bags from the aft cargo compartment and put them in the forward cargo compartment. And I was like, and I knew exactly. We were just talking about this on the podcast. Knew exactly what this was. Captain's like, "What? Why? I don't. What?" I'm like, "Yeah, they just need to move it." So we start, okay, now we got to coordinate with ground control, let them know that this is what we're going to do, and and we had a wheels up time going to Dallas, so that was going to get canceled, and so yeah, it was kind of a big deal. It only delayed us about 15 minutes, but there you go. We were just talking about this on the last podcast. Weight and balances go up, something else is going to be limiting, and that's exactly what happened.
Damn. I think that happened in quite a few places. I have a good friend of mine that works in corporate headquarters, and this is part of his program, being the ramp and tower policy guy. And the next day, I called him up and I was like, "Hey man, how's it going?" Just checking in on him, and he was like, "Oh man, you wouldn't believe, all these delays we had yesterday because of the changes in weights and everything." And it's just I'm sure all airlines across the board had a little bit of a recovery from the change. So
yeah,
we're not the only ones, but man, yeah, it's a good change though, right? I mean, I saw some of the weights in there, and you look at the pilot plus bag. It says 255 pounds. I'm not sure if this is all accurate, but I've got this from somewhere. But that's 15 pounds more than what it used to be. So that's about right for me.
But with the pilots, I've noticed this since the beginning of my career to now. It seems like the captains are getting smaller. Those big guys with the... And they're getting younger. Yeah, those big guys with the, "Hold on, I got to move my seat back before you do a flight control check because you're going to hit me in my gut." Those guys are like few and far between now.
They're on the wide body, Airbus,
but yeah. I was going to say, on the 7-3, you'd see guys actually slide their seats back before you do the flight control check because you're going to just, you're just going to bounce off their bellies with the yoke. But
that's when you stare at them while you're doing it. You're like,
"Oh, I do." I'm like, "Well, you're going to have to move back because we may need the full, full throw of this flight control."
Yeah.
So
yeah. So that's what I've been contending with. But yeah, it was a great flying opportunity. I did a 4-mile run in Tucson. We got in like at 10 o'clock in the morning, and it was still under triple digits. So I'm like, hey, when we get to the hotel, I'm gonna go for a run. If you want to meet up later, we can like go to this place and go get fish tacos or something. He's like, yeah, sure. So I got there, and right away I had downed like half a Gatorade and I went for a run. And in Tucson, the blocks are very much like square blocks, and it's 1 mile per corner, per main corner, street light. So I just said, I figure, I'll go around 1 block. It's 4 miles. That's easy, right? Yeah, I was looking for snakes, but I thought they're not going to come out because they'll get cooked on the sidewalk. It was so hot. It was 100 degrees by the time I got back, and I think I lost some weight and sweat. That's for sure. But yeah, and then I got back to the room, and guess what? I watched the Italy-England game. Did you guys get a?
Oh, you watched it?
Oh yeah.
I didn't watch it.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, my family were all like texting each other, and we were so happy.
Heard there were some elbows thrown and wasn't a fair.
Come on. If you watch European football at any length, you'll see that was actually a pretty civilized game. So that's it, And what about Kyle? What about you? Did you fly recently with these heavier weights?
No, just before the weights, and quite a few captains that I've flown with, we've been talking about the new weights, and especially the new XLRs that our legacy carrier's getting to do Europe. So everybody's been discussing how is this going to affect the European flying, because we're having issues with it just on these transcons with the new weights. So it's going to be interesting to see how that will be handled. I'm glad that we're testing out now and seeing what needs to change or be upgraded, and see where they can fix some issues before we start doing Europe.
Yeah, and it's good to hear that the Neo is not affected by this. I guess they kind of anticipated this, and in the design of the aircraft, I would assume that the XLRs, since they're a newer version, would have the same where they've accounted for these kind of things. So, and Rob, when was your last flight?
It was the 737 flight from Colorado Springs back to Dallas a couple of weeks ago. I think we talked about it on episode 82. But yeah, that was my actual flight. So it was all pre-weight change. So yeah, it's been a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's been about 3 weeks, and you're knee deep in the simulator world, which
1 week away from the last sim, I hope.
Yeah. Well, we are all pulling for you. I know you're going to do great because I expect nothing less from you.
I appreciate it. I got a 97 on my systems test, and I only missed one because I knew the answer, but it's one of those where you kind of click too fast. Yeah, you just miss one like that.
Yeah, not miss one.
And then there was two that I just flat out, I was like, whatever, I don't care. I don't even know these.
Yeah. So it's a computer-based test, if I remember correctly. You sit there, it's 100 questions?
100 questions, 2 hours to take it. Yep.
And what's the minimum you need to pass?
I think it was an 85, so you can only miss 15.
Answer 85 questions and then just click submit and you're good. You walk out the door.
Yeah, that's what actually my sim partner did.
What?
He knew. Yeah, no, he did. He got 5 wrong, so he said, "Well, I have to get to 90." So he did like 91 or 92 just to make sure he got above the 85%. And he's like, "All right, I'm done." He's like, "How many did you get wrong?" He's like, "Oh, it doesn't matter. I got an 87."
Gotta get to my commute flight.
Yeah. I was like, "What?" We got like 7 more to do. Just knock them out.
Sit there and go through all of them, and then double check and triple check, and
it's like the last 10 were like so easy, just like click, click, click. It was just that fast. Yeah. But anyway,
that's when short-term memory is very useful.
Yeah. Well, it's an open book test too, so it's like you could look it up if you had to,
Yeah.
So
whatever. I know. I love it.
Who wants to do that, Rob? I mean,
I know
we're all pilots here. That's too much work to do.
Open book.
I know. If you don't know it, just go do something else, right?
Yeah.
Well, recently we were kind of going back and forth with some of these recent articles that have been surfacing here, and found one on the Aviation Business Information Board that indicated that the FAA has recently issued a policy. It's a docket number FAA 2021-0592, and it went into effect yesterday, July 12th, that limits flight training for compensation in aircraft that hold special airworthiness certificates, including limited or experimental and primary category aircraft. And this information is what I found from the National Aviation Association article that was posted on the 9th. And this new FAA policy on certain flight training raises the NBAA concerns. And I'll have a link in the show notes to the article.
Yeah, I haven't read this. What's the NBAA?
National Business Aviation Association.
Okay.
Yes.
So this was introduced because there's been a lot of activity of mom and pop places, or even the examples up in the Northeast. I think this is what kind of tipped it with the B-25 that crashed.
Yeah.
They were giving rides, and you got an old airplane, old radials. There's very limited amount of people that know how to work on those airplanes, and lost an engine. It crashed up in the Northeast, and it killed a bunch of people. They were given rides that were paying for rides. You go to these mom and pop places around the country that have Stearmans, that have all these cool old World War II, even some World War I airplanes that you pay. You can go get a ride in it, that have had some issues, and I've heard some horror stories about the 85-year-old still wanted to fly and still wanted to give rides in his Stearman, but the FAA wouldn't get in the airplane with him for his check, and giving rides, and eventually they end up killing themselves for doing something stupid.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where they were going with that. With the older airplanes and being 91, you obviously don't have the required training that everybody else has to do in the 121, 135, and even the corporate flying world. So that's kind of the backstory on that.
Yeah. What this policy does is it requires instructors to obtain an LODA, or a letter of deviation authority, before that they can instruct in an experimental category aircraft. The current regulations do not allow an individual to obtain a deviation authority to conduct flight training compensation for hire in a limited or primary category aircraft. And an exemption is required for instructors in these limited and primary category aircraft. So what happened was they came up with a policy. The FAA said, written in blood, we're not going to allow compensation for hire. Now, the problem was flight instructors were now deemed compensation for hire. So they're like, well, wait a minute. If I'm instructing in one of these light aircraft, or like an RV or something, or experiment, my student owns an RV, I'm going to give them flight instruction. Now they couldn't do it. So this was going to affect their ability to have an income, generate an income from flight instruction, paid flight instruction. So there was a little bit of backlash from this. Now, let me see.
Not a B-25, B-17. Yep.
One of the bombers.
The old tail dragger. Yep.
So so that's kind of what this article with the FAA, they're putting it all together as what was the article was going into.
Yeah. So this is from the 2019 crash, actually, of
yes.
the Boeing 17 or
yes.
B-17 Flying Fortress that crashed. They were given rides out of the Bradley International Airport, Windsor Locks, Connecticut, and 7 of the 13 people on board were killed. Another 6, as well as the person on the ground, were injured, and the aircraft was destroyed by fire, with only the tail and a portion of one wing remaining. So the FAA said, we can't allow this to happen. This has to stop, because we can't have people giving rides in airplanes and they're not regulated.
Yes.
It sounds like lack of oversight for sure.
Yes.
In that area.
So and I guess it's good as well. They put a stamp on all of it, just like Tony was talking about. The RVs, these Lancers, all these experimental airplanes that you can get for a third of the price of a Cessna or Piper, one of the Textron, one of the aircraft builders already out there. But the problem you get into is it's experimental. You're not doing the proper flight testing.
Yeah.
Even
Certification and testing.
certification testing, and I know the Piper Malibu Meridian, that family. When it was coming out, you had a lot of these non pilots, so people with compensation, buying these airplanes, and they'd take them up to altitude, and they're not used to thinner air up at out in the 20s. And what they were doing, they were stalling the airplane, and there were a few crashes with that. So these experimentals, as we're finding out, especially Lancer, they're creating a pressurized recip and a turboprop airplane now that are both pressurized that can get into the mid 20s, even the low 30s. So your everyday pilot's going to know, hey, AOA is the key. Don't want to get up here, get slow, install the airplane, and spin it into the ground. So you need to get proper training from these companies or somebody that has had proper training that can conduct that.
And do you remember there was a high altitude endorsement?
Yes.
I remember reading. And do you remember that?
I know you have to get it. Usually when you get a type rating or I got it when I got trained in the 400 series. I think it was like Presto Sim or Simcom or one of those that they'll sign you off. And what it is that you just talk about the flight characteristics at high altitude. The air density is less, so you got to be careful. You got to watch what the airplane's doing. You can't just let it do its thing. So
and I think human factors and physiology too is part of all that too.
Mm-hmm. That's where you learn about the hypoxia and toxic, hypoxic, and all that good stuff.
Yep.
And I recommend the FAA does in Oklahoma City. They have a high altitude chamber that you can go into, and they have a survival course that I highly recommend for everybody. And last time I went, it was free. So you could go do the high altitude chamber, see everybody's body reacts different to if you have hypoxia.
Sounds like you've done it,
like that.
Kyle?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And,
I did one in Altus Air Force Base.
Yep.
It's awesome.
Yep.
It really is an eye-opening experience and a great learning, a great learning event.
Yes.
Because you realize that it's no joke, and you don't realize you realize that you don't know that you're getting hypoxic until it's too late.
Exactly.
It's really interesting. It's really amazing.
So Oklahoma City, the FAA has that. You can go in, and last time I did it was free, and I highly recommend the course to any of the young aviators out there that
definitely
are doing some research on it.
Yep, and just as you're talking there, I went on AOPA.org, great resource for this kind of information, especially if you're a student pilot or a pilot working on your ratings. And in there, they indicate that high altitude endorsement is often misunderstood. According to Title 14 CFR 61.31G, or Gulf, the endorsement is not required to operate as pilot in command of every pressurized aircraft. However, pressurized aircraft, according to Part 61, is defined as a pressurized aircraft that has a service ceiling or maximum operating altitude, whichever is lower, above flight level 250 or 25,000 feet MSL. Prior to receiving your high altitude endorsement, you will need to receive and log ground and flight training from an authorized instructor. The ground training must include at least the following subjects, as we talked about: high altitude aerodynamics and meteorology, respiration, effects, symptoms, and causes of hypoxia, and any other high altitude sickness, the duration of consciousness, consciousness without supplemental oxygen. The effects of prolonged usage of supplemental oxygen causes an effect of gas expansion and gas bubble formation. Preventative measures for eliminating gas expansion, gas bubble formation in high altitude sickness. Physical phenomena and incidents of decompression, and any other physiological aspects of high altitude flight. After meeting the ground training requirements, the instructor who provided the ground training will make an endorsement in your logbook or training record to certify that you've satisfactorily accomplished the ground training. And then you'll have to do the flight training. You'll receive logbook endorsement once you've completed a normal cruise flight operations while operating above 25,000 feet MSL, proper emergency procedures for simulated rapid depressurization or decompression without actually depressurizing the aircraft. That's key. And an emergency descent procedure. Once that flight training is completed, your instructor will fill out an endorsement in your logbook. So 25,000 feet, that's the key.
That's the key.
If you're in an airplane that can go above 25,000 feet, or you are going to fly, what was it, above, even if you're lower than that?
Above 12.5, you have to have some sort of oxygen system.
Yeah, but you don't need the endorsement.
You don't need the endorsement. However, I would highly recommend it.
Yeah.
Because about every pressurized airplane, you're going to get into the 20s. Maybe not up to 25,000 feet, but you're going to be, at least high teens, low 20s. And, every altitude, the higher you go, the worse it gets. But it's still something good to have and good to know how your body reacts.
Yeah. So if the service ceiling or the max operating altitude of the aircraft you're in can go above 25,000 feet, then yeah, you're going to need an endorsement before you can fly that airplane.